Baroness Helena Kennedy joins us right now. She's a Labour peer, human rights barrister and author of Eve Was Framed, to talk about the aftermath of the Sarah Everard murder. Good morning to you, Baroness. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hello, Julia. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Can I talk to you? There's various different things I want to talk to you in relation to this case in terms of the protests and the like. But first of all, I do just want to ask you about a story which is on the front page of various newspapers, including The Sun today. And their headline is sickening. And this is a police officer guarding the site where Sarah Everard's remains were found in Kent, who sent a twisted joke involving a meme containing 6 images of a uniformed officer abducting a woman in a WhatsApp group to other officers. This officer has now been facing disciplinary procedures. The fact that actually a number of the other officers reported this, perhaps encouraging. But what do you make of that? That an officer guarding the site of where the remains of a young woman have been found, sending that meme in a WhatsApp group to colleagues?
Well, Julia, I mean, it's sort of, do they never learn?
Okay.
Do you remember there was the great scandal not very long ago, a couple of years ago, where 2 women were found dead, and officers took photographs of their remains, of their bodies, and then circulated them. So they were dealt with, but you wonder at the mentality of people who are doing that. This beautiful young woman who's been murdered, and the effects of that on her family and the outrage it's created amongst women everywhere, and that they would even think of doing it. It just beggars belief. But the point about it is that there's a way in which women are generally suffering this kind of indignity and disrespect, and it's about an attitude towards women.
Okay. Well, let's come on to that now. We have a few problems with your line cutting in and out. So I know we've got you on video. We're going to try and get you up on your mobile phone, Baroness Kennedy, to try and get a slightly clearer line for our lovely listeners, so we don't miss anything of what you have to say. But let's just go through some of the things while we're waiting for that line to be cleared that Boris Johnson announced. He's announced measures last night in an attempt to reassure women after the killing of Sarah Everard. Pilot schemes going to be run across the country with more patrols to identify, they say, predatory and suspicious offenders. This includes plainclothes police out at night, patrolling bars and clubs inside and out, protecting women from sexual harassment. Also, a doubling of a fund that provides deterrence, such as better lighting on streets, and CCTV, and that fund's going to go up to £45 million. Now, a lot of that is on the front page of the Times today, all these different things announced, Baroness Kennedy. But will any of those actually make a difference? Having officers in and around nightclubs, better CCTV, will that change anything for women in terms of their, not just their own safety, but their perception of their safety?
Well, listen, any of those things are a good thing in that you want to have a greater police presence, that women feel safer, that women shouldn't feel that they have to think twice about walking home. Any of that is useful, except that, of course, it's, I don't know what the statistics are about women coming out of nightclubs facing abuse. I'm sure that there is a level of it, but it's a much wider problem than that, and it's going to take more than that.
I mean, that's the thing. I think a lot of people are feeling that is a drop in the ocean. And again, the CCTV, I've always thought, well, that's a great way of catching the person after the fact, but that's not much use to me before the fact. In terms of the issues that women do face, I maybe it's my age. I think you and I are closer in age than a lot of the women who were talking about the Sarah Everard case and those.
You're younger than I am.
not that much, I don't think. But I'm wondering whether I'm just a bit too out of touch with how women feel about walking down the street, because my reaction, people were saying that women are fearful on the streets. I'm thinking, well, I'm not fearful on the streets. But then I thought, well, actually, I do always take precautions. And when I was younger, when I walked on the streets more often at night, I did always, I would look behind me. I'd have my keys in my hand. And maybe it's wrong for me to have just thought, well, that's the norm. But are we ever going to change that?
Well, I remember you and I had this conversation probably about 6 months ago relating to something else. I can't remember what it was. But and we had this conversation about how we tell our daughters, from about the age of 11, you've got to be careful. You've got to, we watch where you're going. Don't stay with your friends. Don't separate off. Why are we having to do this with our girls and not having better conversations with our boys? And it's about the way in which girls are made to feel we are vulnerable, our bodies make us vulnerable, and if anything goes wrong, then of course women end up getting blamed. I mean, there were even things online saying, why did this young woman who's been killed, Sarah Everard, why did she walk home? Why did she cross the common?
I'm sorry, did you not have that conversation with your friends? Every woman I know raised that with me and said, what was she thinking? Not blame, it's not victim blaming, that's a silly phrase, but simply saying, what was she thinking walking alone at night at 9 o'clock around a common? That's what I used to live around there, and that was my first thought. And in no way does that suggest I think she deserved in any way or brought it on herself. I would not have done that.
But Julia, it's COVID time. We don't expect that the places are going to be crawling with predators.
Well, on the contrary, I would actually say that lockdown has made it that, look, she was leaving a friend's house in lockdown where no one's on the streets. If you've ever been on the streets in the last year, it's absolutely, I would say it's actually frightening out there. It's creepy. The roads are empty. Empty roads are the biggest threat to women, not full roads.
Julia, you and I are going to have to part company on this because I really do think that it isn't good enough that at 9 o'clock at night you say goodbye to a friend who's in your little bubble and you then want to walk home because we're all told to have an hour's exercise every day, and she walks home across a common where people walk dogs and all that kind of thing. Why shouldn't she be able to do that?
I don't think a man if I were a man, I wouldn't walk alone there at night.
Oh, come on,
Seriously?
My sons go out and run, and they do it after their day's work, and they think nothing of it. And plenty of people do that. And, you know, we're all now having to find other ways of exercising because gyms are closed. Why shouldn't a person be able to walk and walk freely and confidently?
I agree with you. Again, wanting the world to be a certain way doesn't mean it is that way. And we have a duty to our daughters and other women to make sure that they, my 14-year-old has said, why should I ever have to change my behaviour because of a threat from men? And I said, well, you shouldn't. No, and you shouldn't have to. However, we play the odds, don't we? We play the odds, and everyone does. And men play the odds. And you've been a barrister for a long time. You know that actually, statistically speaking, it is young men who are more likely to be victims of violent crime on our streets than young women.
That is certainly true, and that they face aggressive behaviour as well. There's no doubt about that. But women experience this in a different kind of way. You only have to, there isn't a woman that you can sit down with who hasn't had this experience. Not all men do this, but all women experience it. And it's that threatening thing that makes you feel diminished, You're sitting on a bus, somebody thinks that he's entitled to start chatting to you, and then when you ignore him, you start getting the abuse about what a filthy piece of work you are, how you're a dirty cow, how you're...
Careful of the language at this time of the morning, though. But I think you're right. I think every woman has experienced that. In terms of what is actually done, in terms of what could make a difference, we were talking a little bit earlier with a representative of Rape Crisis, Katie Russell, about the need to sort of make sure that actually the laws we already have are actually enforced. And for instance, this notion that rape has, to all intents and purposes, been decriminalised because your chances, if you do rape someone, of actually ever getting prosecuted, going to court and getting convicted are so minuscule that to all intents and purposes, it's almost no longer a crime.
Well, listen, it's already a criminal offence to use threatening behaviour, insulting words and behaviour, and to be abusive to people. There is an offence under the Public Order Act, but the police don't use it, and women don't know it's available to them, and men don't know that they're likely to get done if they actually behave in that way. And we ought to be making it very clear, and the police ought to have a sort of definite policy now that they're going to nick people who do this kind of stuff and encourage women to step forward and tell it. 97, there was this recent report, UN Women UK.
Everyone keeps saying this 97% figure. It's not a report, it's a survey.
Yeah, of course it is, but women will tell you that this is part of their daily round, Julia, and it's not good enough that that we say, well, we've dealt with this and we just have to tell people that have to walk in a different way, carry your phone out and pretend you're talking to people when you're walking. For God's sake, women have to be productive and live their lives free of that stuff. And we just have to say, why is it that there's a continuum, and at the small end of it is this stuff, and at the far end of it is the really horrible stuff of people being raped, of people being assaulted, and people ending up dead. So you have to say, what is it about behaviour and so many men feeling that they can do this? And it's other men who have to take this on. My son was on the bus not very long ago, and he watched a guy get on the bus, and then he, as a young woman sitting up at the front on her own, and then he winds his way up past all the seats that are empty and sits down beside her, and he starts wanting to engage her in conversation, and she doesn't want to. He then becomes abusive, and my son went up and said, "Is this man troubling you?" to the woman, and she said yes, and he said, "Listen, mate, go and sit somewhere else."
Yeah.
And then, of course, he got upset and angry, but did move off. Men are going to have to do more of that stuff.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm one of the busybody women that do that all the time, because I know that I feel struggling. I think often actually when a woman intervenes, it can actually be a bit easier. But yeah, absolutely, I'm with you. I think we all need to be looking out for each other. But I think that's men and women as well.
Yeah.
Baroness, lovely to talk to you as always. Baroness Helena Kennedy, thank you very much indeed. Labour peer, human rights barrister, author of Eve Was Framed.